The heated debate among the knights faltered, their animated gestures and sharp voices softening as every head turned toward a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Nanda crouched low, fur on end, as a cold current seemed to sweep through the room, causing a perceptible change in the air. Viego, his large form still and alert at her side, mirrored her tension. The knights, once so lively and engaged in their discussion, now stilled, their movements tense and measured. From the shadows, another joined their crowd, drawing every eye in the room the moment he emerged. A figure of formidable stature, he moved with a quiet grace that belied his size. His gaze swept across the assembled knights, a silent assertion of authority. His armor was a dark masterpiece, black as midnight, with intricate silver etchings of snarling wolves and coiling serpents that glinted in the flickering firelight. The polished surface reflected the glow like a mirror of shadows, but it was the helmet under his arm that truly captivated Nanda's attention. Its visor, shaped into a wolf's snarling visage, seemed to radiate a primal energy. What manner of knight is this? She wondered, with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He looks like he could wrestle a bear with his bare hands, and win. Viego growled softly, his sharp eyes narrowing as he tracked the man's every move. Around her, the knights shifted uneasily. Some straightened their posture, while others subtly reached for their weapons, their hands hovering near sword hilts. Though they knew him, his arrival was far from comforting. This was not the Lancelot they remembered, the chivalrous knight of legend. The imposing figure before them, cloaked in dark splendor and radiating an air of primal menace, seemed more predator than ally. His very presence altered the energy in the room, replacing its simmering tension with an almost suffocating stillness. Viego's presence remained concealed, but his protective stance beside Nanda was unmistakable. "Gentlemen," the man said, his voice deep and cold as a winter's gale. It cut through the room like a blade, carrying with it the weight of unspoken command. Viego's muscles tensed beside Nanda, but he remained quiet as the newcomer continued. "I bring news of grave importance." The knights exchanged tense glances. None seemed eager to respond, but after a beat, Sir Gareth stepped forward. His face, lined with worry, hardened as he inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Sir Lancelot," he said, his tone steady but wary. "What news do you bring?" Nanda's ears perked up. "Sir Lancelot?" The name struck her with an odd familiarity, but she couldn't quite place it. "Is this some kind of joke?" Her whiskers twitched, and she instinctively glanced down at Viego, who was unusually still, his large form, from her point of view, blending seamlessly into the shadows of the room. She resisted the urge to groan aloud. She thought she was witnessing something real, but the more she saw, the more this entire situation seemed to blur into something else entirely. Sir Lancelot's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, a motion so slight it might have gone unnoticed, if not for the weight of the gesture. His voice dropped, each word measured and deliberate. "The king is dead." The announcement landed like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by stunned silence. Some knights visibly sagged, their shoulders slumping under the weight of grief. Others muttered prayers or curses, their reactions as varied as the emotions etched on their faces. Viego's growl deepened, though he remained unseen, his presence still an anchor beside Nanda. Nanda froze. The king? Dead? Her thoughts spiraled. She barely understood this bizarre world, let alone the implications of such a loss. But even she could recognize that this event would send shockwaves through the realm. Who would rule now? Would there be a power struggle? And how would this affect the quest for the Grail? Sir Lancelot continued, his voice unwavering. "We must not falter. The king's death leaves a void, but it also underscores the urgency of our mission. The Holy Grail must be found, not just for our honor, but to restore balance to the kingdom." The knights nodded, some murmuring agreement. Nanda studied Sir Lancelot. There was a fire in his words, an undeniable charisma. But there was also something else, something darker. It wasn't just grief or determination. It was as though he carried a shadow with him, a weight that went beyond the death of the king. Nanda could sense that the large hound beside her recognized it too, his stance still firm, unwavering, ready to protect. Her gaze drifted to his hand again. That subtle motion, gripping the sword's hilt, nagged at her. Was it instinct, or something more sinister? As Sir Launcelot continued to address the knights, the air around Nanda seemed to thrum with energy. At first, it was subtle, a faint shimmer at the edges of her vision, like sunlight glinting off water. But then it intensified. Her surroundings began to warp and ripple, the once solid stone walls appearing to melt like wax under intense heat. The torch's flickering light stretched and twisted into streaks of gold and amber, the room's shadows bending and flowing like liquid. "What the?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising hum that filled her ears. It wasn't just sound, it was vibration, resonating deep in her chest, in her very bones. The knights remained oblivious, their attention fixed on Sir Launcelot, even as the world around Nanda dissolved into a swirling, fluid haze. The floor beneath her paws felt unsteady, as though she stood on the surface of a trembling pool. Then, with a soundless rush, the hall vanished entirely, replaced by dazzling light and the crash of waves. Warm, salt-scented air brushed against her fur, and when her eyes adjusted, she found herself standing on a tropical beach. The sand beneath her paws was soft and cool, despite the sun blazing overhead. The water sparkled in shades of turquoise and sapphire, its gentle waves licking at the shore with rhythmic precision. Nanda blinked, disoriented. A woman in a hijab stood at the water's edge, her sandals half buried in the sand. She turned to a nearby couple strolling along the beach and asked, "What sea is this?" It struck Nanda as odd that she herself seemed entirely invisible to the humans. Where are the squeals? Where are the fusses? None of these people even glanced in her direction, though she stood only a few steps away. She crouched low, ears swiveling to catch their conversation. The woman of the couple furrowed her brow, as though the question posed by the first woman itself was perplexing. Before she could answer, the man beside her spoke up. "It is the Andaman Sea." Both women frowned slightly, their curiosity undimmed. "But it's not like the Pacific or the Atlantic?" the first woman asked. "No," the man replied patiently. "Those are oceans." "So what's the difference?" she pressed. Nanda's whiskers twitched. The question made her head spin. What are the seven seas, anyway? She wondered. When Sinbad sailed the seven seas, were they small ones? Did he avoid the big ones? Her thoughts spiraled into confusion, the conversation stirring questions she'd never considered. The cogs in her mind turned frantically, her curiosity entangled with the human's puzzlement. And then, as abruptly as it began, the vision shattered. The vibrant beach dissolved in an instant, giving way to the cold, solid stone of the knight's hall. The torches snapped back into sharp focus, their steady flames unbroken. The hum faded, replaced by the low murmur of the knights' voices as they continued their debate. Nanda shook her head violently, her heart pounding against her ribs. Whatever had just happened, it wasn't natural. She had experienced strange shifts before, but this was something else entirely. Her mind reeled, still stuck on the odd, spiraling question about seas and oceans. It went round and round, as if mocking her confusion. She let out a low growl of frustration. Maybe someone here would know, or maybe I'm losing my mind. After some time, her brain stopped short-circuiting, and her attention returned to Sir Launcelot, who was now moving toward an exit. His stride was purposeful, every step echoing with an air of finality. Without hesitation, Nanda slipped into the shadows, Viego padding silently at her side, his eyes glinting in the dim light. The corridors beyond the hall were a stark contrast to its grandeur. Narrow and dimly lit, they twisted and turned like a labyrinth. The flickering torchlight cast jagged shadows that danced across the walls, and the air was thick with the scent of old moss. Each step echoed eerily in the confined space, and Nanda felt a growing sense of unease as she ventured deeper into the castle's depths. Viego's low growl vibrated beside her, a reassuring reminder of his presence as much as a warning of unseen threats. Finally, Sir Launcelot stopped in front of a particularly eye-catching wooden door. Its surface was carved with intricate symbols, circles, stars, and serpents intertwining in patterns that seemed to pulse with an inner light. The handle was shaped like a serpent devouring its own tail. An Ouroboros. I used to have a collar like that. She hesitated. She could see the tension in Sir Launcelot's rigid stance, the way his shoulders squared and his hands briefly clenched before resting at his sides. Whatever lay beyond that door, even he seemed wary of it. Viego paused, his ears twitching, his body stiffening as though sensing something Nanda couldn't. He let out a sharp bark, a sound too soft to alert the knights but loud enough to make Nanda glance back. His glowing eyes flicked to her briefly, before focusing again on the corridor behind them, his fur bristling. Sir Lancelot pushed the door open and stepped inside, but Viego lingered at the threshold, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Nanda turned toward him, her tail flicking with irritation. "What now?" she whispered, only to hear a faint rustling in the corridor behind them, a sound too subtle for her ears but clearly significant to Viego. The large hound looked back at her one last time before padding in the opposite direction, his growl fading the further he got. Whatever had caught his attention, it was enough to draw him away. Nanda frowned. "Typical," she muttered under her breath, slipping through the door after Sir Lancelot. The chamber beyond was a strange and mesmerizing sight. The tools and trappings of alchemical art surrounded her, glass tubes twisting like vines, their contents shimmering with eerie light, shelves sagging under the weight of ancient tomes and jars of peculiar powders. A thick haze of unfamiliar scents, sharp, smoky, and sweet, clung to the air. Nanda paused, her whiskers twitching as she looked up, taking in the sights, sounds, and smells. This wasn't just any room. It looked like some kind of magician's domain. But something about it felt incomplete. The space was chaotic, almost lived in, as though the occupier had abandoned it mid-thought. It was clearly important, as Lancelot seemed to be looking for something. He moved through the clutter with measured precision, his dark eyes scanning every surface. He moved with a hurried grace, his eyes darting anxiously across the room, his every sense alert to the danger of discovery. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword, knuckles whitening with suppressed tension. A floorboard creaked beneath his weight, and he froze, his heart pounding against his ribs. He couldn't afford to be caught here. Not now, not when he was so close. Whatever he sought, it was here, or at least a clue to guide him further. Nanda crept closer, weaving between the shadows cast by flickering lamplight. She slipped behind a low shelf, her sharp eyes tracking Lancelot's deliberate movements. The knight approached a large desk, its surface cluttered with scrolls, alchemical tools, and the unmistakable marks of hurried research, ink stains and scattered notes. "This isn't it," Lancelot muttered, his voice taut with frustration. His hand hovered over the chaotic array, sifting through papers with a mix of impatience and care. Then he froze. Something had caught his eye. A scrap of parchment tied with a ribbon, its once crimson hue faded to a muted, time-worn shade. It peeked out from beneath a stack of yellowed scrolls, its edges curling with age. He hesitated only briefly before carefully lifting the parchment free, his movements suddenly deliberate, as if sensing its importance. With a measured hand, he untied the ribbon. Instead of risking a telltale mess on the desk, not that he could make it any messier than it already was, he knelt and spread the parchment flat on the floor. The flickering light played across his features, sharpening his expression into one of focused intensity. From her hiding spot, Nanda strained to see. Her whiskers twitched with anticipation as her gaze landed on the revealed document. A map. Its inked pathways spiraled and twisted, marked with cryptic symbols and hasty annotations. Her amber eyes darted to the center, where a chamber was circled in bold red ink. The air seemed to hum with the weight of its meaning. Beside the circle, in uneven, hurried script, were the words, "The heart lies here." Lancelot straightened, his expression grim. "The vault," he murmured, rolling the map carefully and tucking it into his belt. Finally. Nanda's tail flicked. So this was just a step along the way. Before she could ponder further, a sudden, sharp crack, wood splintering, cut through the room. Her ears flattened as she spun toward the noise, fur bristling. A shadow loomed at the edge of the chamber, stepping into the glow cast by the alchemical tools. Sir Mordred. His dagger glinted like frost, and his cold gaze locked on Lancelot. Lancelot's hand went to his sword, his jaw tightening. "Mordred," he said, his tone sharp as steel. From her vantage point, Nanda crouched low, her heart racing. Her eyes darted to the broken remnants of a small door at the rear of the chamber, now hanging loosely on its hinges. Whatever had just happened, it wasn't subtle, and whatever they'd found here was only the beginning. "You're playing a dangerous game, Lancelot," Mordred spat, his voice a low growl that sent chills down Nanda's spine. Lancelot's sword was already drawn as he turned, his face a mask of cold fury. "What treachery is this?" he boomed, his voice ringing through space. Mordred stepped forward, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Treachery? I prefer to think of it as seizing an opportunity." He glanced at Nanda, his smile widening. "And it seems you've found yourself a rather curious companion." Nanda's fur bristled at Mordred's scrutiny. She didn't trust this knight, not with his sly smile and calculating eyes. Lancelot looked at her, with an expression that spoke volumes, but stepped forward, protectively. "Stay out of this, Mordred," he warned. Mordred chuckled softly, a chilling sound that echoed through the chamber. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of interfering. Yet. But I'll be watching, Lancelot. Watching and waiting for the opportune moment to seize the prize." He paused, his eyes gleaming with mischief. After all, what's a little race without a few unexpected twists? With a final knowing glance, Mordred vanished out of the main door of the chamber, leaving Lancelot and Nanda alone in the eerie silence. Nanda was very puzzled. Why didn't he just come through the door like a normal person? Obviously has a flair for the dramatic. Lancelot let out a sigh, his shoulders slumping slightly. "It seems our quest just got a bit more complicated," he said, his voice laced with a hint of weariness. He turned to Nanda, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and concern. "Come, Nanda. We can't let Mordred get his hands on the alchemist's secret. The fate of the kingdom may depend on it." "We can't. He said we. Guess we're a team now." With that thought she curled around his legs and followed him through the broken door, which led into a beautiful garden.